Hey boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Classic DJ Gear right here on DJcity with myself, your host, the Mexican Mojax, Mr. Remix, aka Yo Look Over There on Fortnite. So if you see me on your squad and I get shot, you better revive me. This month, we are covering the Pioneer DJM-909 mixer, and I know my videos run a little long usually, but this time we have to get straight into it because there's a lot to cover. At first glance, this mixer looks a little familiar, and you're right, this does look like that other mixer. Of course, I'm talking about the Pioneer 707, who's the little brother to the 909. It's basically the 909 without the effects and the touchscreen and everything. It's a strong mixer on its own, but the 909 just kicks it up to a whole other level. The Pioneer DJM-909 is a 2-channel battle-style mixer with enough effects and options built into it to make it perfectly at home inside of a club DJ booth for like a turntable-style club DJ. The 909 is one of the first, if not the first mixer to have a touchscreen built in, plus 50 assignable effects that you can change and alter and edit to suit whatever need you have. But it gets so much deeper than that. So before we get into all the nitty gritty, let's do a quick overview first. The Pioneer DJM-909 was released around 2004 and was considered Pioneer's first serious 2-channel mixer whose success paved the way for Pioneer's current flagship 2-channel mixer, the S9. A lot of the design concepts and features of the 909 have carried over in some way, shape, or form into the S9 and many other competitors' mixers. The fader portion of the mixer features Pioneer's non-contact optical fader as well as alpha faders for the up faders or channel faders for you squares. The fader area is wide open with 4 fader start lights on the face, 2 fader start buttons, 2 adjustable transformer toggles, 2 reverse lights, a master level button, a master level light, as well as the level meters. Plus, the 909 also had the fader feeling adjustment screw on the face so you can adjust the feeling of the fader to make it lighter or heavier. The front face of the mixer has the customary up fader and cross fader controls as well as the fader reverse switches and headphone jack for a 1/4-inch connection. But alongside all of that, you'll find a foot switch input and an on-off channel selection switch. Also, you see the fader start switches for the crossfaders channel 1 or 2, which will control any fader start enabled CD players, but more on that in a second though. The back panel of the mixer starts getting more intense. Okay, first the obvious stuff. XLR master out and an RCA master 2 out. Then we see a booth out as well as a session in. Phono line inputs for channels 1 and 2 of course, but now we also see the player input controls for fader start enabled CD players. Also we see the send and return inputs and outputs for any external effects processors you might have, like the Pioneer EFX 500 or the 1000. And right above that, you see the brightness and contrast controls of the touchscreen in the middle of the top portion of the mixer. These 2 controls are kind of important actually, and you'll see why in a second. Oh, and before we leave the back panel, there's a mic input. I think that's about it. Before I get started on the top portion, understand, there is no way I can talk about every last little thing without doing a small mini-series about all the bells and whistles here. So let's just touch on the main parts. First, the obvious stuff. 3-band EQs per channel with the trim at the top, phono line switches, and an EQ on and off switch. To the left of the face, you see the mic controls and the session in volume. To the right, you see the master volume, booth out volume, and the headphone volume with the channel fader switch between deck A and B. But here's where we start noticing some of the bells and whistles. The headphone cue system now has a master, effect, and cue switch, so you can monitor the master output, the cues, or the effects in your headphones and make adjustments. Alright, the touchscreen. You'll notice 3 buttons along the side of the screen with banks 1, 2, and 3 labeled underneath. Below those, you see the effects adjust button, and below that, the fader curve / bank edit buttons. Banks 1 through 3 flip between 3 effects per bank. The effects adjust lets you adjust the timing of the effect you have selected, and the fader curve option lets you adjust the fader curve for the fader effects you have selected. If you hold the fader curve / bank edit button, you get into the bank edit mode that lets you select effects and replace the default effects so you can customize your effect banks. You'll see 50 different effects listed, some of which are variations of an effect, and some of which make this mixer into pretty much a synth instrument. The touchscreen itself is pretty responsive even despite this mixer I own being about 14 years old. I have said the word effects so many times the word has lost all meaning to me now. Okay, so you see it now, right? This thing is intense, and it's heavy, and it feels really solid and well built, which when you stop and consider that it's 2018 and this thing came out around 2004, I'd say it's damn well built. I mean, it's holding up. The 909, with all of its effects and power, was so ridiculously ahead of its time. I mean, think about all the mixers that came out in the past 3 or 4 years that didn't have a quarter of the effects or options or anything that this thing has. I mean, it's just ahead of its damn time. If this had an audio card built in, which is literally the only thing missing, some sort of Serato or Tractor or Miss Pinky audio card, some sort of audio card. If this thing had an audio card built into it, it would probably still be one of the most popular mixers out because of all the options and all the effects and how well built it is. Hell, this thing is making me want to go buy a Serato audio card just so I can use this out every now and again. In all honesty, this mixer is great. I have no complaints but two. First thing, the screen. The screen can be a little hard to see sometimes, especially if you're not directly over it. That's why it's really important to adjust the brightness and the contour that's on the back panel of the mixer. You need to see the screen, especially if you're planning to play with the effects. Having direct light coming down right now, it can be a little hard to see, it gets a little washed out. So I'm assuming that if I were to use this out in the daylight, I probably won't be able to see the screen. I'm gonna have to cover it, whatever. So if you're gonna pick up one of these used, make sure the screen works. The next thing is, if you're gonna pick up one of these used, make sure the buttons alongside of the screen work. Now, if you're buying a used mixer, it's always great to make sure the knobs and the faders all work, or you can replace them or have them repaired. But in the case of the 909, you also wanna make sure that the buttons work. These buttons all click, they all lock, they all latch. That's how you know you're on that screen or that bank. So if they don't lock, they don't latch, then you only see that little option temporarily, in which case you have to hold down the button and then use whatever options are on the screen. So if you're gonna buy one of these used, make sure those buttons work. It's really important. Of course, check the knobs, check the faders, check the power supply, the whole nine. But in this case, watch the buttons, all right? Very important. Other than that, I have no complaints about this thing. Screen, buttons. Make sure those work if you're buying one of these used. The 909 used is one of the more expensive mixers that I actually picked up. I paid about $300 for it because it was in good condition, because it came with the box, and because it still had the manual and everything in it, and it was packaged really well. I didn't have any idea about all the extras that the seller was gonna throw in, like the original faceplate, another beat up faceplate, spare crossfader, a bunch of other stuff. But for the price that I paid and the condition that it's in, which I would say it's about an 8 out of 10, considering it has the box and the styrofoam and everything else in it, $300 I'm not mad at. Now, I've seen these go in really, really bad shape for about $100, all the way up to $600 to $700 for mixers that are in really good shape. Like, have the box, they're about a 9 or a 10 on a 10-point scale. So my advice to you is shop smart and be prepared to pay if you really want these things, because they can go up to $1,000 used easy. So what were some of y'all's favorite effects from the 909? Who's still rocking a 909? What do you think about the 909 overall? Please let us know in the comments down below. We love hearing about that stuff. We love getting into the conversation with y'all. And if you haven't done so already, please make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to DJ City on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook at DJ City. Till next time, y'all, this is Mr. Remix checking in from my studio in beautiful Houston, Texas, right here for DJ City. Y'all be good, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.